Dave, a Toronto Maple Leafs defenseman has been linked in trade discussions of late. I'll tell you exactly who that may be and why it makes a lot of sense, to be quite honest with you. Also, the conference finals are set in the East, set in the West. Will help tee up tonight's Oilers-Avs game. All that more on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother on TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from if you haven't yet already, and also check us out now via video format on YouTube. Go log in and check out Locked On Leafs on YouTube. It's our road to 1,000 subs, so once we get there, we're giving away a jersey, so sub up, share the content as well, so that all of Leafs Nation can get to listen to Dave and I suppose. All right, Dave, an interesting day today. So what we're going to be doing, obviously, we saw the Rangers move on to the Eastern Conference Final. Big time matchup, Igor versus Vasilevskiy. We'll tee that series up in a little bit and also talk about the Rangers beating the Hurricanes last night. Also teeing up Oilers and Avalanche tonight at 8 p.m. Game 1 of the Western Conference Final. And that one, boy, does it ever have everybody intrigued. But before we get into that, there are some Leafs news that we kind of need to get to. Elliotte Friedman, bit of a Frege bomb, I guess you could say, in a way, not necessarily, but threw a little bit of a firecracker, I guess you could say, into Leafs Twitter today. Our Discord was set ablaze through it all as well. He is under the impression that potentially the Maple Leafs could be listening on a Rasmus Sandin potential trade. Why don't we go ahead? We've got this audio here, Dave. Why don't we play the audio and then we can kind of get into it afterwards. So this was Elliotte Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast on the potential of the Leafs moving on from a blue liner, and that blue liner being rookie defenseman Rasmus Sandin.
You know, with Mark Giordano being re-signed, they now have 5 lefties. Now, Brody plays the weak side. There's Muzzin, there's Riley, there's Giordano, and there's Sandin. So there's at least 4 and potentially 5. And the other thing, too, is Sandin, he needs a new contract, and Toronto doesn't have a lot of space. So I think that they like him as a player, and I think that he's enjoyed being a Maple Leaf, and I don't believe he's asked for a trade or anything like that. But I've had a couple people just say to me, watch where this goes in terms of, does Toronto feel they have to create room for him? Is he concerned about his spot? And also, is there a deal here that makes sense? I've just had a couple people say to me, don't blow it out of proportion, but it's something you have to keep an eye on,
So there it is. So it's not anything that is imminent, but as we know, Dave, typically, Elliott's not coming out in public and talking about specific players in trade rumors if there's not some discourse going on behind the scenes. Your initial thoughts at the comments made there by Mr. Elliotte Friedman.
I think the timing is a bit intriguing. It comes not too long after the Giordano signing, and now it just appears the chatter has really been picking up, right? We kind of discussed this when Giordano was signed, what this all meant for the blue line, and we kind of threw out possibilities, but now we've kind of got something that's got a little bit of legs to it. And yeah, it is going to be quite interesting because we know we have a couple of players that Kyle Dewis has personally brought in, Jake Muzzin when he made that big trade and the signing, and Rasmus Sandin, who was a first round pick not too long ago. That now it kind of feels like we're back to that kind of discussion there. And look, the Discord chatter was quite, there was quite a debate there, right?
Yeah.
You got a lot of people who are, rightfully not they're a little hesitant of trading a young promising defenseman, and others who are like, well,
Well, why don't we talk through it and go through a
sure.
little pros and cons list, I guess is what we could do for a potential Rasmus Sandin trade. So, let's talk about maybe first of all, maybe some of the reasons why a Sandin trade would make sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think first and foremost, you talked about it. We discussed this a little bit and kind of threw it out there before there was much concrete evidence of a potential trading of Rasmus Sandin. But once they signed Giordano, that left side was pretty strong with Riley, Muzzin, and Gio. And unless you're flipping Sandin to the right, which at this point in time, you're thinking, okay, well, Labushin's going to play the right side. You got Brody playing the right side. I mean, is either one of those guys going to be moving up on the top pair? What about Justin Hall? Like, I don't see any of those guys. So, and also Sandin's not going to play your top pair minutes either. So it's like, okay, I don't know how much I love moving Sandin over the right side either. I was actually speaking with Cheryl Pounder today, former Team Canada women's defenseman, gold medalist, and she said she's not a big fan of moving skilled defensemen on their off wing because it just doesn't allow them to move the puck as efficiently. And you'll notice that like TJ Brody's not a skilled defenseman, which is why he is, it's more likely a player of his caliber will end up on his offhand than a Morgan Riley or a Mark Giordano or a Rasmus Sandin. So the lefty righty thing, I think, is probably the first kind of glaring thing when you look at the roster as to like why a Sandin trade makes sense. The other thing is when you're looking at your defensemen, you kind of need to see if they have any other use to your lineup, right? And if let's say you want to have him come and be on the right side, just to say, is he going to be a penalty killer, Dave?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Is he going to be on the first power play unit over Morgan Riley?
No.
Is he going to be on the second power play unit over Mark Giordano?
Potentially, there's more of a likelihood of that happening, but Mark Giordano, I still think he has a lot of value on the power play because of he's got a good slap shot. He's got a good shot. Sandin, not really known for his shot from the point.
No, I would say no. Like when all said and done, probably not. So he doesn't add much flexibility or versatility either. You know what I mean? Where at least Timothy Liljegren, if you're looking to move one of the two defensemen, Liljegren, A, is right-handed. B, he can kill penalties. Like he's got a little bit of jam to him, and he's someone who could grow into that role. Where Sandin, I don't know if the size allows him to really do that. So now you're talking, okay, lack of flexibility, lack of versatility. There's 5 lefties. Oh, he needs a new contract. Not sure what that's going to look like. And ultimately, I look at all of those reasons and I say, yeah, I guess it would make sense. He is now what I would call expendable. Is he a bad player? Do I want to move Sandin? Of course not. But if you could use him in a trade to go out and address a different need by giving up one of your strengths, which is, left shot defenseman, to either acquire a right shot defenseman or a goaltender, perhaps, potentially a top 6 power forward, as a package to try and get that, something like that. So you also got to give to get. Those, I would say, are probably the main reasons if you're making sense of a Rasmus Sandin trade. Is there anything else that I left out there that maybe you could add? If not, maybe we could talk some of the cons to trading away a Rasmus Sandin, maybe why you don't do that.
Well, I mean, the other thing to add is look at the guys look at the contract situations on the blue line. Giordano's here for at least 2 years. Muzzin, I believe, has 2 more years, if I'm not mistaken, on his deal.
Yeah.
Riley is just going to be starting his new deal. So it's like, where is the space? Because they've locked themselves in to these guys to long-term deals. So sorry. Yeah. Muzzin has 2 more years on his deal. So like, that's the other one here. The obvious con is his age, right? He is not like if you think that Rasmus Sandin is what he is, probably not. He's still 22 years old. Defensemen take a little bit longer at this, and
Is he 22 already? I didn't think he was that old.
he's
Is he
22.
22? Okay.
He's
Still, like there's
drafted
still
2018.
there's still quite a way to go. Like he's not really at a ceiling yet. I think we both believe that he can develop into a top 4 puck moving defenseman. I'm just not sure. Like it could happen in Toronto, I guess, but again, because of the reasons why we laid out before, it just may not happen here for those reasons. But keep going. A couple of reasons why maybe you don't trade Sandy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the age is always going to be something that people point to. His development got stinted a bit by the pandemic. He had the injury, so you have to kind of look at those factors as well. You also have to think of costs. Costs, you have to find cost savings somewhere. You know, Sometimes you have to figure out ways to save money. Like Rasmus Sandin is not going to cost a lot on his next contract. He hasn't proven himself yet. He's an RFA, so the Leafs can get some cost insurance with his deal, and then potentially look to trim another deal if they want to create some salary cap space. Um, you have to think of, you always have to think about the future. You always have to think about what's, looking for ways to, you know, improve. You can't go with the same. With the Leafs, they can't go with the same formula and expect a different result. Something has to change. So in order for things to change, you have to give yourself some flexibility. Maybe being able to trade Sandin offers up those opportunities, but I also think his value is probably lower now because teams are saying, "Well, you're only trading this guy because you've kind of got nowhere else to go with him." I think the Leafs would be better off. And they won't just be throwing this guy away. They can figure out ways to make him fit and make him work, so they're not put in that situation. But like that's the other issue is right. This is a guy who's a first round pick 4 years ago. You think he has a lot of value, but you know, young defensemen are quite valuable. But it also depends on who you're trading him to. What's his market? What's the market like for young defensemen that haven't really shown a lot at the NHL level yet? So you have to be very careful in that regard too, in that you're trading him at a point where his value isn't at probably where you expect it to be.
Yeah, that's absolutely a con. You might be trading at a bit of a low, but I would say that what he showed us when he was healthy this season proves that he is absolutely bare minimum ready to go as an everyday third pair defenseman and an extremely effective everyday third pair defenseman. I mean, the expected numbers when Rasmus Sandin's out there on the ice were solid this season. Like pretty much anybody he played with, they always had a positive expected goal result, a positive shot share. Granted, some sheltered minutes, obviously, but it's something that I think could prove that over time as he matures, that's a player who you feel pretty comfortable having in your lineup every single day. So I think there would be value, and there would be multiple suitors who would be interested in bringing in a young, up and coming, puck moving defenseman like Rasmus Sandin. So I'm not so certain that there won't be much of a market. But to your point, is it as high as the Leafs think it could be? Should it be higher? And does the injury factor into that? The other thing that I want to note as maybe the one other reason, and probably the biggest reason as to why I would hesitate to make a move and trade away Rasmus Sandin, you never really know what the health is going to be of a guy like Jake Muzzin and Mark Giordano, as they're both over 30, and Muzzin dealt with injuries all last season. At the end of the day, if that happens again and you trade away Sandin, you don't really have much depth behind him. So for depth purposes, I know you don't necessarily want any guy like a Sandin or a Hall or Liljegren, whomever it may be, who's the seventh defenseman, odd man out. You don't necessarily want those guys sitting out at this point because they've proven that they can be everyday NHLers, especially these young guys who you want to grow. So I understand why it sounds good to try and move on from those players, but injuries do occur. You do need to have depth, and having somebody like a Sandin would be, incredible to be able just to plug and play if a long-term injury arises for one of those left defensemen. So that's probably the biggest reason that I'm hesitant, I guess, is don't really know what we have in Jake Muzzin after an up and down season. Played well in the playoffs, but how much of that was because he was sheltered by Jake Muzzin? And if he's not going to be with Muzzin next year, how good is, or he's not going to be with Brody next year, rather, how good is he going to be? I'm just not sure. It wasn't great without Brody this season, I can tell you that. And that's where I guess the other name gets brought up. So Sandin has been brought up in trade rumors. I guess it's either one of Sandin or Muzzin. If you are to move out a defenseman, it's got to be one of these two guys as well. Would you have an appetite to potentially move on from him, or would you rather keep Muzzin in the fold and Sandin be that player you would more likely want to trade?
I'm concerned about Jake Muzzin over an 82 game season. I was very impressed with what he did in the playoffs, but the 82 games leading to the playoffs it was a roller coaster. It was not very good.
Yeah.
So that's where you have to weigh it. That's a significant, like, you might think, just over $5 million for a top four defenseman doesn't sound like a lot. But if what we saw this season from Jake Muzzin is what you're going to expect going forward, I don't think that's value well spent for the Leafs, where you can maybe this was a sign of Mark Giordano, TJ Brody, that becomes your second pairing, and then you find a
Even
better,
Gio, you sold on Gio as a second pair guy at 39 years old. Was
or
he
maybe they think
39, I
Rasmus,
think?
or maybe they think Rasmus Sandin, he gets into that top four role, and then you take that money you would have spent on Muzzin, you find a better partner for Morgan Rowley, right? You make the upgrade there versus having the surplus of left shot defensemen and one of them being shaky at best in Jake Muzzin.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are decisions that Kyle Dubas is going to have to try and make over the offseason. I guess there's a potential that he could do nothing and they could all return and he just keeps the stable of depth that he has on the blue line. Obviously, internal depth is good at the end of the day. Like, it's a good problem to have too many NHL caliber defensemen. But when you're talking about youth and trying to grow these young guys, it's not always the best having them sit up in the press box regularly, like we saw happen this year. Between the stable of guys who are rotating in and out of the lineup. All right, why don't we take a quick break? When we get back, we can quickly chat about the Rangers Hurricanes game that went down last night. The Rangers with a big time dub. They move on to the Eastern Conference final, rather, where they will be meeting the Tampa Bay Lightning. So that's going to be an exciting matchup. We'll talk about some of the more polarizing storylines that we'll be looking forward to. Let's do that when we return. But first, let me tell all y'all about one of today's show sponsors, and that is Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain or auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? And why wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry? You got computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the exact same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They've got everything you need, from brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today and find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On their How Did You Hear About Us box. Let them know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano. Dave Morassutti with me. We're your hosts here at Locked On Leafs, a daily Maple Leafs podcast. Still bringing you that daily hockey content Monday to Friday. We try to find the Leafs angle, and today, beauty served up by our friend Elliotte, I guess, with this Rasmus Sandin bomb in a way to give us that Leafs content. But with there not being too much as the offseason is kind of hit for them, we still got to chat some hockey, and this playoffs are still ongoing. So why don't we transition into what else is going on around the league? So last night we saw the Carolina Hurricanes get ousted from the playoffs. The New York Rangers, a 6-2 victory to move on to the Eastern Conference Final. I made some moolah last night, Dave. Did you do okay? Because we both were thinking Rangers were gonna take it. We were thinking the goalie over the perfect home record in a do or die game 7 would work. And I parlayed it with the over, and I made a decent amount of money over at Bet Online. I can tell you that.
I think you and I both saw Andrew Kopp with that anytime goal prop, and Andrew Kopp
I did.
screams a guy that you expect to put up some good performance in a game 7.
Yeah, thank you very much to Rob Brindamore for pulling the goaltender so we could get that easy goal prop from Andrew Kopp.
Who was it
Appreciate
that flipped that puck to him, by the way? Like that
Was it Fox?
was it Fox? Whoever that was,
Maybe Zibanejad.
merci for that Hail Mary
Yeah.
flip, because I was sweating a little bit at the thought that he might not get that opportunity to score. And thank you, Gerard Gallant, for having him out there late in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. The highest scoring game that we saw in the entire series, 8 goals. So it definitely hit the over, which is at 5.5. And hey, we said yesterday on the game, or yeah, in yesterday's podcast, we personally were on the Rangers and the over. It was either the Hurricanes in the under or the Rangers in the over. That's how I was playing this game because that's how I figured the story was going to unfold. And that's exactly what we saw happen. What I did not see happening, which maybe I should have seen it happening. Antti Raanta going down in the second period there, and Peter Kochetkov having to come in midway. He was real shaky once he got in there, and that's really when the Rangers were able to kind of feast and put this game away pretty quickly. But Antti Raanta, another injury here. It's the second time in these playoffs he's gone down. The third time he's gone down since the final week of the season. He missed a couple of games with a bit of a tweak, and I mean, it's not great if you are the Carolina Hurricanes and you thought you were coming into the year with Freddie Andersen as your number 1 and Antti Raanta as your number 2. You had completely revamped your goaltending, and then come game 7, neither were ready to perform for you. Obviously, Raanta started the game, but left with injury, which has really plagued his entire career. The guy's almost made of the glass, unfortunately, and pulls up with an injury in the second period. But I want to talk a little bit about Freddie Andersen. Dave, we know this man very, very well here in Toronto, spent 5 seasons with the club. If you were a Carolina Hurricane, how do you think they're looking at Freddie right now, knowing that, it's the postseason, everyone's battling through whatever they've got, but Freddie Andersen has been traveling with the team, doing some light practices. Rod Brindamore had a bit of a snide comments that he made a couple days ago, or maybe it was yesterday, where he had talked about Freddie Andersen, how they brought him in, they signed him thinking that he'd be that guy who could play and win them that game 7. Was not the case. Very similar ending to this season that Freddie had the season prior, where he did not end the year as a starter after being the guy, and then ultimately, taps out on his team and says, "Uncle, I'm injured, I can't play." And I don't know, man. I got a bit of a weird feeling about Fred Andersen here with the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm curious what his future is going to be like there, because if I was the Canes, if I was Rod Brindamore, I'd have a pretty sour taste in my mouth over how that whole thing kind of unfolded here in the playoffs.
Yeah, like this is a weird one because we know what the way it ended with the Leafs. It was like
Similarly in Anaheim too. Like in Anaheim, it wasn't necessarily like the healthiest guy in Anaheim either.
No, that's something where I when the Leafs, when people were debating whether to bring Freddie back, I said you got to think about the fact that he was not healthy. He's not getting any older, or sorry, he's not getting younger. He's getting older. He only got a 2-year contract in Carolina. So Carolina didn't exactly go all in on him either, right? So There was, I guarantee there was some thought of that on Carolina's part, that we're not going to commit long term to a goalie who's had injury problems, and let's be real here, performance problems too in the playoffs, right? Like at times, look, if you look at the numbers with the Leafs in the last two playoff appearances, they don't look bad. But then when you look at how he played in those elimination games,
Not great.
would it have been any different if Freddie Anderson was in this game tonight?
Yeah, I mean, Freddie Anderson in front of Carolina and Freddie Anderson in front of Matt Hunwick and Jake Gardner, maybe a different story. I'll definitely give him that credit. I saw some hilarious tweets come down today about after Ranta went down and Kachekov had to come into the net, and they're like, how quickly can they fly David Ayres out here to try and help save their season? 911, get David Ayres in here stat, and didn't happen. Did not happen. They end up taking the L, and the Rangers go on to win that game. I mean, for a while, Shesterkin was like, the Canes probably should have won that game. I think that they had more chances, they had more shots, they were probably the better team. And if you look at the numbers, that the analytics would show that the Hurricanes were expected to win, but Igor Shesterkin, this guy he's on one right now. He had a couple of tough games against Pittsburgh in the first round, but since then he's rebounded. And the games that he's lost against Carolina have been all low scoring. They've been very low scoring games. So he's feeling himself right now, and he is the maybe only reason why this Rangers team is going on to the Eastern Conference Final, I think.
You think there's some? So I was looking at this. I think since the first two game of since the two games that he was pulled, because remember he was pulled at points in that series against Pittsburgh, he has over, I think, a 9.43 save percentage.
Yeah,
that is third best among goalies. Jake Onger being one, because Jake Onger was on one, and Jordan Binnington was also on one. I think there's a bit of a theme here in that some of the teams you didn't expect to go far, or teams that maybe are going farther than as they have. You look at the goaltender, right? Where would Tampa Bay Lightning be if it wasn't for Andrei Vasilevskiy? Where would I think more so for these. Where would the Rangers be without Shesterkin? You look at the Dallas Stars. There's no way that should have gone as many games as it did, but that's because of Jake Ottinger. Even Colorado, like what I think almost what gave them a bit easier time in that series was Jordan Binnington went down. It's a recipe for success in the playoffs when you get a goaltender to step up at the right time. It's not just the numbers. You look at where early in that game where Carolina, I think at one point, were out shooting the Rangers 12-6. There was never any doubt the Rangers were going to lose this game because Shesterkin was making save after save after save and timely ones. And that's the value of having an elite goaltender like a Shesterkin. You expect them to step up in those moments, and eventually the Rangers took advantage of a shaky Antti Ranta and a rookie goaltender that is thrown in the worst possible spot. Like, if you're also Frederik Andersen, thinking that you put this young rookie in a position. I mean, look, we don't know if Freddie was cleared at all to play. We don't know all those. They were very secretive about all this.
Again, like it happened last year
with the Leafs, right? That's just I imagine being in that room and having to talk to that to that young goaltender and being like, you
did your best.
You did your best.
Or, that's on. Right. That's my bad. That's
wish
my bad.
Wish I could have been in there so you didn't get put in that spot. But this goal, Kochekov, he was a second round pick of the Hurricanes a few years ago. Like,
yeah, he's a good young goalie.
You've invested that's significant draft capital for a goaltender for a team like Carolina that plays a very structured defensive system where you think they wouldn't invest a lot in goaltending. So, maybe this is something they hope that this young goaltender can take some cues from and move forward. Yeah, no, Carolina, I like this it didn't help that they just couldn't put the puck in the net either.
No, and it's not for lack of trying. I mean, they definitely had a couple of really good opportunities, but
Maybe we're in a road game as well once in a while. As they say,
right?
mix in a road win once in a while.
Yeah, mix in a road win. Exactly. You go 0-6 on the road. I mean, you're not gonna go too far. You're lucky you made it to game 7 of the second round without winning a road game. That is unheard of. That's actually the first team to ever do that. To go 0-6 to start a playoffs and not be eliminated. Like yet, at least. They still had another game to go, which is kind of wild. So yeah, that'll do it for the Hurricanes on their year. Solid season, but at the end of the day, unable to defeat the Rangers in game 7, and it sets up a New York versus Tampa Bay, a rematch from 2015 in which the Rangers were victorious and went on to the Stanley Cup final that season. Bit of a different story, way different clubs today than they were back then. When we get back, let's chat about that series, talk a little bit about the Western Conference final as well. You're listening to Locked On Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano, got Dave Morassutti with me. We're still in playoff mode around the NHL. Leafs eliminated, but we're down to the final 4 teams. And let's start in the East. We were just chatting about the New York Rangers and them moving on to play the Lightning. So we might as well start there, and then we can get to Mac-Jesus showdown in a little bit. But Rangers Lightning. Vasilevskiy versus Shesterkin. I don't think, I mean, outside of Toronto, obviously making it to this far, this is probably like if TSN, Sportsnet, ESPN could have scripted it any better than a Rangers Lightning Eastern Conference final and an Oilers Colorado Western Conference final. Like they got Vasi versus Igor that they could sit here and market the Eastern Conference final matchup over, and then McDavid versus McKinnon to market the Western final over. It's really kind of like perfect for the league. They got to be loving this.
Yeah, look at the star power, right? Every team has a first overall pick. So everyone that's big on drafts.
Well, do the Rangers count?
Hey, give Alexi Lafreniere a little credit there. The Canadian, he actually had a pretty decent game. I know he's not of the
I think
level
he
of.
assisted on. Did he assist on Heedle's goal? I think he may have assisted on Heedle's goal.
I know he did on Fox's goal, the first goal of the game.
Yeah,
Made a nice little back pass to Fox. Took the defenseman with him. Fox was able to snipe it. Like, it's not even that. Like, you've got 2 of the best goaltenders in the league in Shesterkin and Vasilevskiy. You've got 2 of the arguably better first overall picks in the last few years in McKinnon and McDavid. You got just the star power of these teams. It's exactly what the NHL has needed, right? You got to sell your stars. And the McKinnon comment was quite funny. I know just him talking about the McDavid matchup and him not really caring too much about it, but talking about how if it lowers escrow, it's like it always comes back to the escrow players, always.
love it.
But yeah, no, I know people were kind of saying that the West is likely going to be a high scoring, all shooting gallery type of series, while the Eastern Conference is going to be a goaltending battle, and basically the first team to score 2 goals is going to win. It'd be very interesting to see how the contrasting styles potentially come across in these conference finals. But it's very fun because you got teams that have the star power that likely deserve to be in the position they're in. I've been bullish on the Oilers, but you see what McDavid and Draisaitl have done. It's almost like they should be there based on that alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, both of those guys leading the entire NHL in scoring with 26 points. But I mean, quickly behind them, all of a sudden, is Mika Zibanejad and Adam Fox. Fox has 18 points as a defenseman through 2 rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's wild what that young man has been able to do so far. He's been to 2 7-game series, so that's 14 games, but still 18 points through 14 games for a D-man. Pretty darn good. And he's going to be going up and matched up against, Victor Hedman, another defenseman who's pretty darn good. 2 Norris quality defensemen. I guess let's get a prediction out of you for Rangers Lightning. How do you think this one ends up?
This is going to go 7 games just because it feels it's either going to go 6 or 7. And I'm going to go Rangers.
Rangers. Okay. I like it. You're feeling optimistic, are you?
I'm feeling a bit optimistic because they just went through those are 2 tough series, the Rangers. I mean, so did the Lightning, although they proved that second round.
They kind of quickly deposited Florida.
Yeah.
That's why, it's interesting. This is like the rested versus tested debate, where you've got the Lightning who've been resting now for a week, and they've been able to rest up, the veteran bodies, the all the bumps and bruises that they've accrued through the playoffs so far. I mean, we heard the coach John Cooper say the other day, like, he's never seen this squad be so beaten after 2 rounds as he did this year. So giving them that extra time to kind of heal, I think, has only strengthened Tampa Bay, considering a couple of months ago, everyone's saying, oh, is this team running out of gas? Well, they had a nice little week to refuel and get set for another kind of final 2 series here. Whereas the Rangers, they're going back-to-back 7-game series. Vasilevskiy or Igor Shesterkin, already once in these playoffs kind of showed that there was a little bit of a gas issue when it came to him, and he saw so many pucks early in that Pittsburgh series. I wonder, it seemed like he caught a second wind here against Carolina, and like you said, since going down 3-1 to Pittsburgh, it's had a .942 save percentage since then. So is this him catching a second wind? And if it is, like, how long can he go? Because eventually that crash comes. And I wonder, after back-to-back 7-game series, is that going to come here against a team that's going to test them in the Tampa Bay Lightning? I think I'm going to stick with my original gut feeling, which was whichever team won the Toronto-Tampa series, which I thought honestly was going to be Toronto, but whichever team won that series was going to be the East representative in the Stanley Cup final. So I have the Lightning winning this one in 6 games. That's what I think we're going to see.
I'm going to cheat a little bit here because I got visual cues. Igor Shesterkin against the Lightning this season. Now, sometimes I understand regular season, you can't take it full throttle here.
Yeah.
Igor Shesterkin in 3 games against the Lightning, 3.00, .958 save percentage, and a 1.30 goals against average.
Yeah, pretty good.
Not too shabby. I think this is where they're the goaltending thing.
You know what the problem was? Can you pull that back up for a second there, please? Let's pull that back up for a second, because what we saw happen in the regular season and what we're seeing happen in the playoffs, 2 different beasts, right? These are 2 different beasts, and it really depends on when these games actually were too. But you see the issue there, 1.30 goals against per game. You see, the problem there is that on average, Igor allows 1 goal against Tampa per game. Sometimes that's not enough to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, my friend. Sometimes you won't be able to score more than 1 goal against Andrei Vasilevskiy. You see the issue there now, Dave. You see the issue. You need to see zeros across that board in order to really ensure that you can beat this squad, because Vasi will put up a whole bunch of zeros for the Tampa Bay Lightning. You talk about Vasilevskiy, or you talk about Igor, since the same date that Igor has started to get going, Vasilevskiy also has been dynamite in that same time span. Which day is that? Since it's actually since my birthday. Since my birthday, May 13th. So, the whole back half, I guess, of this month. Igor, .942 save percentage, a .199 goals against. Pretty good, you would say?
Not too shabby.
Yeah, it's okay. How about Andrei Vasilevskiy with a .978 save percentage and a .80 goals against. Can't even score a single goal on this guy. That's through 5 games, my friend. So that's game 7 against Toronto, and then the 4-game sweep against the Florida Panthers. Through his last 5 games, he's averaging less than a goal a game. And this is the playoffs where it really matters. We got to put a wager on this, Dave. We put a wager on
Oh,
this?
I think we have to. Also, the Rangers have home ice in this
They do.
series.
They do have home ice advantage in the series. You are correct on that one. We're gonna have to figure out a
Man.
wager before the game tomorrow night. We're going to figure out exactly what we're going to wager on this one, and you'll have to come back to the pod and figure out what exactly we're willing to put on the line. I would imagine that we are not all that different on how we think the Western Conference Final is going to go down. I mean, McDavid versus McKinnon, the Avs versus the Oilers. It's going to be an extremely compelling game. I mean, you've got Zach Hyman versus Nazem Kadri, if you want your Leafs angle for you. I'm really excited for this playoff series. I think it's going to be spectacular. I believe this is a series that could potentially go 7 games, maybe 6 games, but 6 or 7 for sure. I don't see a 4 or 5 gamer coming out of this one at all. I don't think that Colorado, though, this is their year. I think they finally got through that hurdle of getting past the second round. I see McKinnon and company making it through against the Oilers and getting into the Stanley Cup final against Tampa Bay. And ultimately, it comes down to goaltending. I don't know how much I can really trust Mike Smith in net. I don't know how much I can trust the defense of the Edmonton Oilers, and just the fact that the Avalanche have so much more depth scoring than the Calgary Flames did. I think that they just match up a lot better. So I really think that the Avalanche probably going to win this thing in 6 games. I'm going to say Avs in 6 is going to be my guesstimate for the Western Conference Final.
Oh man, I'm not even giving Oilers that much of a chance. I'm going Avs in 5.
Really? Wow. You're not even going to give Connor McDavid 2 wins. Just him himself, I think, can get them 2 victories. With him and Leon. We're
One for sure.
not going to give shade to Leon. He's just every bit as spectacular.
I love it because like Leon was great in that series. That ankle injury is rough.
Yeah, but again, he's had now a few days to rest it. I'm sure he hasn't taken ice packs off that thing for the entire 5 days that he's been resting. And the Blues, or the Avalanche rather, had to go to an extra game with the Blues. So again, they're coming in not as much rest. Now, home ice advantage is with Colorado, so they will be in Denver, and the altitude and whatnot that could prove to be somewhat of an advantage as well, having that home ice. But ultimately, I think just McDavid's a determined, mean son of a gun right now. I think just he'll put the team on his back and be able to gut out at least 2 games in this series, in my opinion. But we're both liking the Avs, though. It's kind of McKinnon, Makar, Rantanen, Kadri, Landeskog, Devin Tays. I mean, the list goes on and on. That team is so good. Nichushkin, Burakovsky, JT Compher scored a couple of goals. Darren freaking Helm came in with an over-the-top rope game-winning goal, 5 seconds left to advance to the Western Final. Either way, it's going to be an extremely entertaining third round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, which it's been a while since I've been this intrigued about third round matchups in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's like legitimately, typically it's the first round's awesome, second round's okay, third round, and then it ramps up a little bit more during the Stanley Cup. But this might be the best round of them all because I am so fired up for both of these matchups.
You tell me you weren't fired up for Islanders, Canadians being in the conference finals last year?
Yeah.
That didn't tickle your twine at
now
all?
you see my point. You see my point there, Dave.
I'll add this about Colorado. They have the high scoring players, but they also got guys that will do the dirty work, the grunt work.
Yep.
I think that
Zach Hyman also will get in there and do the grunt work. Evander Kane's added a completely different element to this club with the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, it's not just the big boys. They're getting a lot of scoring, and they're getting a lot of help from guys down the lineup. I think even Nate McKinnon said it in his press conference yesterday. He said the Oilers don't get enough credit for the depth on their team. You got to respect those guys as well. So I'm going to give them the due respect, and I think they'll be able to get out a couple of games. But again, can't wait. It's going to be fantastic. Puck drop for game 1 is tonight, 8 p.m. down in Denver. And Dave will probably be back to talk about it tomorrow. And we'll also be teeing up game 1 of Tampa and New York and whatever else comes to light in the hockey world or in Maple Leaf land. But I can't wait. Why don't you leave us a comment below? Let us know what you think about the whole Rasmus Sandin thing, though. That'll be the comment below. Rasmus Sandin. Is this a guy you're thinking about trading? Give us your reason as to why you don't think it would be a good idea to trade Rasmus Sandin. Right in the comment section below, or reach out to us on Twitter at @Mick_Canuck or at D_Morassutti. All right, that's going to do it for us today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs and hockey content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mick_Canuck, at D_Morassutti. Also, find us on YouTube. Leave a like, a comment as well, and please subscribe if you haven't already done so. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, leave a rating or review. That'd be much, much appreciated. All right, Dave, good stuff today. We'll be back with another episode for all y'all tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.